Hello again, fellow miners. What did you do during the break? I made a cup of tea. Okay, this is part 3. And because part 2 ran a little long, and because this part actually has even more slides than part 2, I'm going to cut this in 2. So let's get started. Here we are on part 3 of using other critics. Interpolating other critics, which just means inserting other critics smoothly into your own writing. First, a recap. Remember that you are the star of your essay, right? I am fabulous. For this reason, you should try to make other critics serve you. Yours is the voice your readers should hear most clearly and most strongly, and your secondary sources are merely supporting players. But where do I use the secondary sources as supporting players? I hear you cry. Ha! I have an answer. Think Peel when it comes to paragraph structure. Now, I apologize because we're not actually going to do body paragraphs until a later lecture, but for the moment, just remember Peel as a structure rather than getting a precise explanation of what's involved there. Peel is actually a play on what you learned in a previous lecture. P, just with an L added. Point, evidence, explanation, link. So, here we go. You can use other critics in the point area when you are making your point to define, clarify, or contextualize a key idea. You can use them to set up a particular problem. You can use them to support a factual claim. You can use them when you're presenting your evidence. Here, you can use them to apply or test out a critic's idea on your own example, or you can use them to support the significance of your example. You can use them in the explanation area. Here, you can use them to contextualize or clarify the example you've given, to support a factual claim, or you can use your example to refine, complicate, or critique a critic's idea, or to adjudicate in a critical debate. The only place you don't use them is in the link. This is the space where you restate your own argument, so it is other critic free. All right, now that's all very good in the abstract, but how about some examples? I'm glad you asked. An example of using secondary critics when it comes to point. Remember, here you can use them to define, clarify, or contextualize an idea, set up a particular problem, or support a factual claim. So, for example, a number of scholars have asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic. Hamlet's depiction of the rot in Protestant Denmark is direct evidence of its writer's Catholicism, Patrick Smith insists. Right, you have made a station. That was a combination of statement and assertion. You have made a statement, comma, an assertion, and now you have used Smith to support your factual claim. He is your proof. Example of using it for evidence. In the evidence section, you can use other critics to apply or test out a critic's idea on your own example. For example, a number of scholars have asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic. Hamlet's depiction of the rot in Protestant Denmark is direct evidence of its writer's Catholicism, Patrick Smith insists. Yet plays such as Measure for Measure suggest the rot that lingers within Catholicism too. Tick, well argued. You have tested Smith's idea or his assertion, and you have found it wanting. And not only that, but you've added excellent evidence. Good for you. Another example of evidence. Here you can use other critics to support the significance of your example. A number of scholars have asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic, but I would disagree. Don't worry, in a later lecture we're going to get into the issue of using I. Okay? I would disagree. Plays such as Measure for Measure and Romeo and Juliet suggest that rot and foolishness linger within Catholicism, too. As Robert Moulton points out, Shakespeare questions all the dominant religions of his time. He is quite literally an equal opportunity offender. Okay, notice that what you've done here is you have said that a number of scholars have said something, but you disagree with them. You've staked your claim. Okay, then you have pointed out what your evidence is to stake your claim, and then you have added a critic to support the significance of your example. Very, very nice. An example of how to use critics in the explanation area. Here, you can use other critics to contextualize or clarify the explanation you have given, or you can use your example to refine, complicate, or critique a critic's idea or adjudicate in a critical debate. Okay, I'm not really one for adjudicating in critical debates, so we will not be touching on that one. Here is your example. A number of scholars have asserted that Shakespeare was a Catholic, but I would disagree. Plays such as Measure for Measure and Romeo and Juliet suggest that rot and foolishness linger within Catholicism too. It is thus not so simple to assign a religious affiliation to Shakespeare since, as Robert Moulton puts it, he points out the inadequacies of both religious systems. Here you have used Moulton to clarify your explanation, and you have also used your own example to refine and explicate more clearly Robert Moulton's assertion. Very nice. Whenever possible, try to paraphrase rather than quote. Okay, I know that in all the examples here, I have used quotations, but I've done that so that you can see clearly what's going on. Generally speaking, however, my advice is to try to paraphrase phrase rather than to use quotations. I think I probably need a gulp of tea so that I stop saying words in an odd way. If an author has said something so wittily, so beautifully, or so memorably that you cannot retain its effect when you put it into your own words, then by all means quote it. Okay, but otherwise paraphrase it. Let's say, for example, that on page 95 of his book, John Smith, that well-known critic, has written, "Naked mole rats make an excellent subject for evolutionary study." This is exactly the kind of thing that you want for your essay. You might incorporate this into your own essay in the following way. John Smith suggests that naked mole rats are an optimal species to use when studying evolution. This is a paraphrase of Smith's own assertion. Paraphrase means to put in other words. So you have paraphrased it, but you have still included your citation so people know where to find the original quotation. Paraphrasing is not plagiarism. I understand how it can look like it because it looks like you're saying what the other person said. You are, but because you cite the author and the page where the reader can find the information, you're not plagiarizing because, as you remember, plagiarism is taking somebody else's words or ideas without giving them credit. And in this case, you are giving them credit. In the example above, you mention Smith in the sentence and you give the page number in brackets. At the end of the sentence, so you're covered. Remember that if you give the author's name in the course of the sentence, you don't have to put it in brackets. Sometimes, though, a direct quotation from your source is the best option. You just are not going to be able to put it as well yourself. You want to use an actual direct quotation. In those cases, interpolate the quotation as elegantly as you can. And here are some ways to do that. And here is where we are going to pause because otherwise things are going to get very long indeed. So perhaps you can go and make yourselves a cup of tea and come back in a couple of minutes for the final moments in this week's lecture.